If you're thinking of raising a family in Portland, Oregon, this video is for you. We're going to get into every aspect of what it's like to move to Portland and have a family. Let's go. In this video, we're going to get into all the aspects of what it's like to raise a family right here in Portland, Oregon. Hey, I'm Aaron Cullen and this is Brianna Cullen, and I'm a local real estate agent right here in Portland, Oregon. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. All right, let's get into it. Raising a family in Portland.
We moved to Portland when our oldest was about 1.5 years.
Yep.
And since then we've added another baby to the mix. So we are in the thick of raising young kids here in Portland. I'm so glad that we made the move here to do that. So we're gonna get into, the good and the bad, what it's like to raise a family here.
Yeah.
Today we're walking through a beautiful neighborhood in Northeast Portland. This is Alameda. You'll see as we walk through, there are some really gorgeous homes in this area. It's a very special neighborhood, beautiful architecture, big leafy streets, really beautiful area.
Yeah, and this neighborhood has sidewalks, so that's another on my list, being very kid-friendly, to have those sidewalks to keep the kids safe. They can ride their bikes, you can walk on without worrying too much.
So just a fun fact is that this neighborhood is near Alberta Arts, which is where I lived back in my footloose single days,
Yep.
pre-kids.
Fancy and free.
Yeah, but I actually used to walk down to this neighborhood. I remember walking down this street back in that time in my life and thinking about how great it would be to live here, raise kids in this neighborhood. We don't live here now, but it just really is a beautiful, beautiful area.
Yeah, I love this part of Portland. We're in the northeast quadrant, and the houses, as you can see, are just awesome. Lots of character, older homes, all in this area. And you're still gonna find some rougher houses if you're looking for something on the cheaper side that you could fix up and make your own. This neighborhood definitely has a lot of those as well.
And then another thing about some of these neighborhoods in the Northeast is that they tend to be pretty walkable. So you can walk to Alberta Arts. Alberta has tons of little shops, restaurants, and cafes. There's a great kids bookstore and a couple of boutiques over there. So this would actually be a great neighborhood to be in the city and raising kids. But let's take a step back and talk about just overall Portland Metro, what it's like to
raise
be
a family.
Yeah, be a kid.
So the first thing we'll get into is what is there to do here if you want to take your kids out and go explore the city. What are you gonna do? Where are you gonna take them?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is just all the access to amazing nature. And kids do well when they're outside, especially little kids. They have a lot of energy to burn. They need to get outdoors. Portland has such great parks, such great forests, nature trails, opportunities to be outside. So let's talk about some of those. I think how many parks are there?
300 parks in Portland, and that's not even including the metro area. That's the city of Portland. 300 parks. And then if you get into all the suburbs, they themselves can have up to 30 parks themselves. Like Lake Oswego over where we live, they have 29 city parks in that town. And so there are so many parks. I was thinking about that. You could go to a different park every day of the year and still have parks left over in the metro Portland area.
Our daughter always says, can we go to a new park?
Yeah, we just kind of...
This house, it is amazing.
Yeah, this house is awesome. Wow, love the architecture on this. And even in their landscaping, that's one of the things I love to do about walking around the different neighborhoods in Portland, is just checking out the different landscaping that people have. Really cool.
So to go with the nature and the theme about being outside, I think one of the things for me that's just so wholesome about raising kids in the Portland area are things like going berry picking in the summer. We actually can walk to a trail down the street from our house that has blackberry bushes in the late summer, late July, August, go blackberry picking. A lot of the parks around our house have that, so we could just be like out for a stroll and our kids have like blackberries smeared all over their face because they're just picking them off the vines. And then in the autumn, there's pumpkin patches, there's apple picking, Christmas tree farms, all of that just like outdoor experience that to me is so wholesome.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts about living in Portland for kids. There are so many different outdoor activities that you can do. It's really endless, and just getting them outside, you know, just enjoying the nature and the beauty. It's so eye-catching and beautiful to look at. You don't even necessarily have to have something to do, but just getting them out, going to a park. A lot of people actually have chickens in Portland, and so that's fun for kids. What kids don't love chickens? So I always find that really cool. Two of our neighbors have chickens, so I think that's really neat. And
look at this, like little, these are all over. We have these in our neighborhood too, but this is just a little community library. I mean, very kid-friendly, very neighborhood feeling that you leave a book, take a book. You and Juliet pick up books from the one by Westridge.
Yeah, over by us where we live, there's a few different corners that have these little kids book corners. Leave a book, take a book. And so we use these all the time. My daughter gets so excited and she sees it. She's like, let's see what kind of books they have today. And you just find new interesting things, and it's not as much pressure too. I feel like sometimes we'll just
doesn't have to be the best book in the world.
We'll get a book, and I know it's probably not a good story for her, maybe a little too advanced. She's only 4.5. But when I get home, I usually end up just making up a new story to go along with the photos anyways. And it makes a shorter book for me, and it's more interesting, I think, for her too as well.
So I think the nature, and going along with that too, is all the things that you can get to just within a short drive of Portland. So we were actually at the coast last weekend, taking our kids to the beach. We have such a good time there, and it's such a beautiful beach, and it's really kid-friendly in the sense that it's not crowded. You can have like a huge beach area to yourself for the kids to run through tide pools and explore. And then in the other direction, you have the mountains. So in the winter, sledding and skiing and those kinds of outdoor activities. And then you have a lot of water. So you have the rivers. You can go swimming, stand-up paddleboarding, kayaking, a lot of outdoor activities.
Getting my own kayak or stand-up paddleboard is high on my list this summer. I was just talking about that. That's one of the things I've been wanting to do for the last 3 years since we moved here. But with little kids, as you might know, time is a little limited. So I haven't even been able to do that yet. So this summer, making that a priority, I'm gonna get decided on a stand-up paddleboard and start doing that. And one of the great things about living here is we do have a lot of rivers and lakes on the outskirts outside of Portland. In Portland, there's only one lake, Lake Oswego, but we do have the Willamette River, which cuts the city north and south, and then the Columbia as well. So a lot of people use the rivers as just a playground. Take the kids, they have little beaches there at different spots and parks, and everybody just really enjoys using it. Lots of paddle boards, kayaks, and even water skiing.
So since we're talking about nature and the outdoors, I would say one thing that can be a little harder, especially with younger kids, is winter weather. So we've spent many a very rainy winter weekend trying to figure out how to occupy 2 toddler preschooler age kids in the house. You have to get creative. There is a lot of time spent inside in those winter months. And there's also something to be said for having the right gear and getting out for a walk or a park trip anyway, because you don't have a choice. You just have to make the most of it. And I think living in the Northwest, you really learn that having great gear, getting outside anyway, not letting it hold you back is a really great attitude to have.
Yes, absolutely. And from a real estate standpoint, one of the things that I've learned also as a parent is that having a bonus room, an extra room in your house, is really valuable here in Portland when you're looking for a home, because in those winter months you can set that up as a kid's little rec room, play room. have a little, small play structure. We have like a little mini slide in ours, and a little mini tent, and a little, play pen kind of area for our 1-year-old, 1.5-year-old. And it's great to be able to have that extra, that kid's safe zone, to really be able to go in there, let them, just set them loose, let them go a little crazy.
Make a huge mess.
Yeah, exactly. And then torn up, and they have that like safe zone, in the house. So that's been very valuable to us.
My daughter and I colored a big construction paper sun. So on those rainy days, we have a big bright yellow sun up on the wall to give ourselves a little sunshine in the playroom. And Erin's right, if it's in your budget to have, a space that's dedicated to just hang out, lounge. And I think that is one of the things that people move to Portland for, is the value that you get in your home. And often it is more affordable to have a bigger space here than it would be in some of the other big cities, especially on the West Coast.
Yeah, and if you're moving from a bigger, higher cost area, you might be able to buy a little bit bigger home here. And so that's something that I definitely see a lot of my clients valuing, is having that extra little bonus room, if it fits your budget.
So just to give you a little sense, we're here in early July and it's really beautiful out today. So it was a little drizzly this morning. We have a little summer rain. It smells so good. Everything is in bloom right now. So it's a really beautiful day. One of the things that I wanted to hit on in terms of like early parenting and young kids that I thought was a little bit hard when we first moved to Portland was finding the kinds of mom groups or like play groups that I really had access to very easily in Los Angeles, where we were coming from. So, in LA and in San Francisco, I know as well, and many other big cities, there are places where you can gather for a mommy and me, or for, parent baby classes. In LA, it was the Pump Station was one, but there were several where I was really able to gather with other moms and for breastfeeding groups, classes, things like that. It was a huge part of my community there. And when we moved here, it was actually really hard for me to find. And then we went into a pandemic, so it became impossible to find. And I would say they do exist here, but it takes more work to find them.
And if you're gonna have kids, you're also gonna need great doctors. And that's something that Portland definitely has. We have a lot of great world-class medical facilities.
Yeah, I would say OHSU, which is a great, medical school and medical center, is in downtown Portland. So that creates a lot of great, healthcare research-based. But then we also have the amenities of a big city when it comes to medical care, which I think is really important. I think one of the great things about Portland is that it does have all of the big city amenities with some of the benefits that you get in a small town.
And that's one of the things that really attracted us to Portland and had it high on our list when we were looking to move from a bigger city like Los Angeles. We wanted those big city amenities, but that more small town feel, where we felt like we could get connected with our neighbors, run into people we know, and really get that, no other way to say it, but that small town community feel where people kind of look out for one another, and people are really friendly. And I feel like we've really found that here. We got kind of lucky, I feel like, but the more longer we live here, just the more people you meet, and you realize it's not just our own little experience. It's, lots of people experience the same thing.
I love running into people. It's like my favorite thing. So when we run into another family we know at swimming lessons or the farmer's market, it makes me feel anchored and like safe, and like there are people that we know that are looking out for our kids, and that our kids are growing up, knowing their neighbors, and that's something that I was definitely looking for.
So you're probably wondering, what are public schools like here in Portland? So let's dig into that a little bit, because it's not a straightforward answer of like, schools are great or schools are terrible. It's definitely a more nuanced thing than that.
And I think that's true of, most of the big cities that I'm familiar with, where you might have some really great school districts, some school districts where the experience is going to be pretty mixed. I would say that's the same for Portland. So if you're in the city of Portland, it's really going to depend on the particular neighborhood you're in and what elementary school, middle school, high school that neighborhood feeds into.
In the actual city of Portland, it's definitely be more nuanced. I would definitely reach out to me and let me know if there's certain areas you're interested in. I could give you a little bit more insight on that because some of the elementary schools could have a rating of like a 10, and then other elementary schools, could have a much lower rating, and they could be, right next to each other. And so a lot of different factors, go into that. But then when you get out to the suburbs in the greater Portland area, they all have their own school systems. And in general, the suburbs are gonna have a higher rating of their school systems than the Portland. But if you talk about nationally, the Portland school system does rank very well nationally. But when you compare it to the suburbs, if you're just focused on the public schools, the suburbs might be a better option for you.
And there are a handful of suburbs with really reliably well-known, high-quality school districts. So if that's something that you're really moving for and you're really focused on, your kids going to a high-quality public school, reach out and we can help you figure out which suburb really is the best fit for your family.
Yeah.
That was a deciding factor for us in where we decided to live in Portland. So we live down the street from a great elementary school. We're excited to be able to walk our kids to kindergarten at that elementary school when they're ready. And so reach out if that's a priority for you. I would say in Portland, like in a lot of other big cities, some families are going to decide to send their kids to private school if they're living in the city, and then some are going to public school. So, it's really just a mix.
Overall, I would say parents really are involved in their kids' education here. And I think that then leads us into a little bit of, what's the city feel here? What's the city like, to you, like the overall feeling here in Portland, and how it is, to raise a family. It doesn't have that hustle and bustle of, say, like Seattle. It's a lot more, in my opinion, relaxed.
Yeah, so Aaron and I were talking about this actually, and some cities have like a type A personality. So Seattle, I think, is like the more sophisticated older sister of Portland in some ways. I think Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, like cities that have that success-driven, status-oriented style. Portland is not that. I would say certainly, people care a lot here about quality of life, about experience, about family lifestyle. If you've ever read the book Eat, Pray, Love, Elizabeth Gilbert talks about how every city could be described with one word, and she goes to Rome and she says Rome's word is sex, and she says I think Manhattan's word is maybe money or success. So what do you think Portland's word would be, honey?
Yeah, I think Portland's word could be creative or outdoorsy.
When you think about Portland, you think about commuter cyclists and really quirky hobby groups that get together, and it's very creative. It's very artsy. Artsy could be another word for Portland. I think creative is a really good one.
Yeah, we'll stick with that. All right, that wraps up what it's like to raise a family in Portland. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and reach out. My information's in the description area right down there. It was my pleasure getting to talk to you guys. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.